However, these very strengths masked a critical Achilles heel. The P-38's heavier airframe and higher wing loading, compared to the exceptionally lightweight A6M Zero, severely limited its maneuverability in tight, low-speed turning engagements. Its roll rate was comparatively sluggish and its turning radius significantly wider. Japanese pilots, veterans of campaigns in China and deeply familiar with the Zero's unparalleled agility, swiftly identified and ruthlessly exploited this fundamental design limitation. Their tactical doctrine was straightforward: negate the P-38's speed advantage by luring it into a protracted dogfight, typically at lower altitudes where the Zero's maneuverability was paramount. They would execute tight, sustained turns, often employing scissoring maneuvers, effectively forcing the P-38 to either disengage, surrender its tactical energy, or inevitably fall victim to the Zero's superior turning performance. This deliberate exploitation of the P-38's inherent design flaw led to a disproportionately high attrition rate for American pilots in the early stages of the Pacific Air War, solidifying the Zero's reputation as a virtually unassailable opponent in close-quarters combat. By mid-1943, the first anomalies regarding the P-38 Lightning emerged from bewildered Japanese pilots in the South Pacific. These veteran pilots returned with fragmented, incredulous accounts of P-38s exhibiting sudden, uncharacteristic agility. A Zero pilot, accustomed to outmaneuvering the Lightning, might report a P-38 executing a defensive maneuver with an impossible rate of roll or a G-turn that defied its non-aerodynamic profile. Japanese command was predictably dismissive. Steeped in the doctrine that the P-38 was a formidable escort but an inferior dogfighter, intelligence officers attributed these observations to pilot error or combat fatigue. The very notion that the heavy, twin-boom fighter could mimic the nimble A6M Zero was considered an absurdity. This institutional skepticism, however, sowed the seeds of a profound tactical blindness that would soon cost them dearly. Lieutenant Kenji Tanaka, a decorated pilot of the Imperial Japanese Naval Air Service with 17 confirmed aerial victories, had become accustomed to the predictable limitations of the American P-38 Lightning. Its formidable speed and high-altitude performance were well known, yet its Achilles heel in close-quarters combat, a wide turning radius and sluggish responsiveness, was a tactical gift to the agile A6M Zero. However, on a sweltering afternoon in late August 1943, high above the Solomon Islands, Tanaka's established combat doctrine shattered. During a routine interception of a P-38 reconnaissance flight, his squadron engaged in what should have been a textbook attack. As Tanaka positioned his Zero for a classic scissors maneuver designed to trap the P-38 in an unavoidable turning fight, the American twin-boom fighter executed an abrupt, impossibly tight turn. It was a maneuver that defied every known specification and combat report regarding the P-38's performance envelope. The Lightning, instead of presenting its vulnerable broadside, reversed its vector with startling rapidity, turning inside Tanaka's arc and placing itself in a position of offensive advantage. Tanaka himself, momentarily disoriented by the P-38's uncharacteristic agility, found his Zero now on the defensive, narrowly escaping a burst of 50 caliber fire.
This was not an isolated incident. Across the vast expanse of the Pacific Theater, from the skies over New Guinea to the critical air corridors above Rabaul, reports from frontline Japanese pilots escalated in frequency and consistency. Previously dismissed as anomalies or the product of pilot error, these accounts now converged into an undeniable, deeply unsettling pattern. P-38s were consistently performing tight, defensive turns, escaping what would have been previously fatal traps, and, most disturbingly, initiating aggressive maneuvers that utterly defied their documented flight characteristics. The Lightning was no longer merely fast, it was now agile. This profound shift shattered the tactical calculus of the Imperial Japanese Naval Air Service and Army Air Force pilots. Their once reliable zero advantage in maneuverability, the cornerstone of their close combat doctrine, was eroding before their very eyes. Confusion rapidly transformed into frustration, then into a creeping sense of dread as the enemy's fork-tailed devil gained an inexplicable new dimension of lethality. The shift in the aerial dynamic quickly translated into profound frustration within the cockpits of the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force and Naval Air Service. For months, their tactical doctrine had revolved around exploiting the P-38 Lightning's perceived lack of close-quarters maneuverability. Japanese Zeros and Tonys, with their superior turn rates, had systematically outflown and decimated Allied formations by engaging them in tight, protracted dogfights. But by mid-1943, this established paradigm began to unravel, replaced by a baffling and deeply demoralizing reality. Individual ace pilots, once confident in their ability to outmaneuver any twin-tailed adversary, returned from sorties exhibiting an unprecedented level of confusion and exasperation. Anecdotal accounts pieced together from post-mission debriefings painted a consistent picture of bewilderment. Seasoned veterans, such as the highly decorated Lieutenant Commander Shigeru Kawabata, reportedly expressed profound frustration, exclaiming, "The Lightning simply turned inside me. It defied all known flight characteristics. What has changed?" This wasn't an isolated incident. It became a pervasive and disturbing trend. Pilots who had survived countless encounters found their established dogfighting tactics suddenly ineffective. Their signature close-in turning circles, once a guaranteed kill mechanism against the P-38, were now frequently met with an equally sharp, if not sharper, response from the American fighters. The psychological impact was immense. The P-38, once a predictable, if formidable opponent, had become an enigma, a ghost in the air that seemed to bend the very laws of aerodynamics. This erosion of tactical certainty sowed seeds of doubt, leading to a palpable demoralization among squadrons that had, until then, held a near-mythical belief in their fighters' superiority. The sudden, inexplicable shift in the P-38 Lightning's combat performance triggered immediate and profound alarm within the highest echelons of the Imperial Japanese Army and Naval Air Forces. Commanders who had previously exploited the P-38's inherent maneuverability limitations now faced an adversary exhibiting capabilities that defied known aeronautical engineering principles. This was not merely an anomaly of pilot skill, it suggested a fundamental, yet invisible, alteration to the American airframe or its flight control architecture.
Japanese intelligence responded with frantic urgency. Technical teams, often comprised of the finest aeronautical engineers from firms such as Mitsubishi and Nakajima, were swiftly dispatched to numerous P-38 crash sites scattered across the contested landscapes of New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. Their directive was unequivocal: conduct meticulous forensic examinations of every recovered fragment. They painstakingly scrutinized wing spars, elevator linkages, rudder assemblies, and the hydraulic systems. Every rivet, every weld, every control cable was examined under the most intense scrutiny. Yet the results were consistently baffling. No evidence of significant structural modifications, novel components, or unauthorized field alterations could be discerned. The recovered aircraft appeared, on the surface, entirely identical to earlier P-38 models whose performance characteristics were well documented. Concurrently, Japanese intelligence officers intensified the interrogation of captured American pilots. These sessions focused relentlessly on the P-38's operational envelope, specific turning maneuvers, and any recent upgrades or modifications to the aircraft. Interrogators, often possessing a keen understanding of aviation mechanics, pressed relentlessly for details on control responsiveness, G-force limits, and the perceived turn radii. Yet the pilots themselves, while confirming a dramatic improvement in their Lightning's agility and combat efficacy, largely lacked insight into the specific mechanical reasons behind this transformation. They consistently reported a P-38 that felt more responsive, more alive in a dogfight, but offered no tangible mechanical explanation that intelligence analysts could seize upon. This debilitating inability to pinpoint the source of the P-38's enhanced performance created a critical intelligence blind spot that severely hampered Japanese strategic planning. High command, including influential figures within both the Rikugun Kokutai, Army Air Force, and Kaigun Kokutai, Navy Air Force, convened urgent staff meetings. The question, what has changed and how do we counter it, reverberated through every discussion. Orders were disseminated for renewed aerial reconnaissance, for pilots to observe P-38s with unprecedented scrutiny, and for ground crews to meticulously scour every piece of recovered material. The absence of a concrete, verifiable answer fueled suspicion, frustration, and a dangerous underestimation of the adversary's adaptability. It became starkly evident that the perceived technical advantage, once a cornerstone of Japanese air superiority, was now profoundly eroded by an unseen, unidentifiable factor, threatening not just tactical engagements, but the broader strategic calculus of the Pacific theater. The initial bewilderment among Imperial Japanese aircrews quickly metastasized into a profound strategic quandary for both the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force and Naval Air Service. Their established doctrines, meticulously refined through early successes against Allied fighters, had been predicated on exploiting the known maneuverability deficiencies of aircraft like the P-38 Lightning. Japanese pilots were trained to engage P-38s in close-quarter turning fights, confident in the Zero's superior agility and instantaneous turn rate. Suddenly, these fundamental tenets of air combat, the very foundation of their tactical supremacy, were being systematically undermined by an unseen and unidentifiable factor. Commanders, confronted with a growing dossier of pilot reports detailing P-38s executing turns previously deemed impossible for the twin-boom fighter, found themselves in a tactical vacuum. Lacking any intelligence concerning the nature of this sudden transformation, directives issued from headquarters were, by necessity, a desperate blend of speculation and counterintuitive adjustments. New engagement parameters were circulated, advising pilots to avoid protracted turning engagements and, in some cases, to disengage entirely if a P-38 demonstrated unexpected agility. Formations were modified and pilots were instructed to attempt high-speed slashing attacks or pincer movements, aiming to overwhelm the P-38 with numbers before it could exploit its newfound nimbleness.
Yet, these desperate tactical shifts proved largely ineffectual. Japanese pilots, despite their skill and bravery, were fighting an enemy whose capabilities were constantly shifting and whose advantages remained a complete enigma. Their modified tactics, designed to counter a specific set of P-38 attributes, were rendered obsolete by an unknown variable. The Lightning now turns like a zero, one bewildered pilot reported, an assessment that defied every technical specification known to Japanese intelligence. Each engagement where a P-38 inexplicably outmaneuvered a Japanese fighter was not merely a lost aircraft or a failed mission. It was a devastating blow to the collective understanding of aerial combat and a stark reminder of their inability to adapt to this phantom threat. This tactical confusion, coupled with the psychological toll of facing an unpredictable adversary, steadily eroded morale and exacerbated morale, exacerbating the already significant attrition rates, pushing Japanese Air Command closer to a complete strategic reevaluation. The tactical confusion and psychological toll on Japanese Air Command had reached a critical juncture. What began as baffling individual encounters quickly escalated into an undeniable statistical trend that starkly reversed the balance of power in the skies over the Pacific. Prior to mid-1943, engagements between the agile Mitsubishi A6M Zero and the P-38 Lightning often favored the Japanese. While the P-38 boasted superior speed and heavy armament, its perceived sluggishness in close-in maneuveration rendered it vulnerable, leading to unfavorable kill-loss ratios for Allied forces. However, as the Mckenna modification propagated unofficially through Allied squadrons, the combat statistics began a dramatic and rapid reversal. Pilots who had once struggled to disengage or to gain an advantage in a turning fight now reported startling successes. The P-38's newfound agility, allowing for sharper, more immediate changes in vector, meant it could not only escape the Zero's deadly turning circle, but often turn inside it, gaining the crucial firing solution. Data from various air groups in the Southwest Pacific area, initially anecdotal, soon coalesced into undeniable statistical evidence. Where Zero pilots had once routinely claimed multiple P-38s for every loss, the balance shifted. Suddenly, P-38s were not merely surviving, they were dominating the close-quarters engagements that were previously the Zero's domain. This tangible shift confirmed the worst fears of the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force and Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service commands. Their long-held doctrine, predicated on the superior maneuverability of their indigenous fighters, was being systematically dismantled by an unknown factor. The P-38, once predictable in its turning limitations, had become an unpredictable, lethal adversary. Japanese squadron leaders, analyzing sortie reports and combat film, found themselves confronting kill-loss ratios that increasingly favored the Allied Lightning over their own nimble Zeros. This wasn't merely a localized tactical adjustment. It represented a profound strategic shift. The P-38, once viewed as a heavy interceptor suited primarily for boom and zoom tactics, was now proving itself capable of sustained dogfighting, directly challenging the established Japanese air combat doctrine. This forced a complete reevaluation of Japanese engagement protocols and overall air strategy. The element of surprise, the psychological edge of superior agility, had vanished, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty and the stark reality of mounting losses, underscoring the undeniable effectiveness of a modification whose origins remained a complete mystery to them. The inexplicable shift in aerial combat dynamics above the Pacific quickly escalated beyond mere pilot anecdotes to a critical strategic concern for the Imperial Japanese Air Forces. Reports from seasoned Zero pilots, once dismissive of the P-38's dogfighting capabilities, now painted a picture of baffling agility and lethal unpredictability. The growing casualty lists and the dwindling success rates against the Lightning were undeniable, forcing a reevaluation at the highest echelons of command. The inexplicable shift in aerial combat dynamics above the Pacific quickly escalated beyond mere pilot anecdotes to a critical strategic concern for the Imperial Japanese Air Forces. Reports from seasoned Zero pilots, once dismissive of the P-38's dogfighting capabilities, now painted a picture of baffling agility and lethal unpredictability. The growing casualty lists and the dwindling success rates against the Lightning were undeniable, forcing a reevaluation at the highest echelons of command.
Faced with this perplexing reversal of aerial fortunes, the Japanese High Command was forced to confront a disturbing reality. Their meticulously developed tactical doctrines, honed over years of combat experience and rooted in the Zero's superior maneuverability, were suddenly rendered obsolete against an enemy whose capabilities had inexplicably transformed. The very foundation of their aerial supremacy was crumbling, not due to a new, superior aircraft, but to an unseen, unquantifiable advantage in existing P-38 airframes. This strategic ambiguity fostered an environment of profound frustration and an urgent demand for a counter-tactic, yet none could be devised against an unknown threat. The culmination of this profound confusion and tactical impotence arrived in the form of an unprecedented operational directive, in a move that signaled a staggering psychological and strategic concession for a proud fighting force. The Imperial Japanese Air Forces issued a formal order to its pilots: avoid direct engagement with P-38s whenever possible. This was not a suggestion, it was an official command disseminated across their operational areas. For an Air Force that prized aggression and aerial combat supremacy, such a directive was an admission of defeat, a public acknowledgement that the P-38 Lightning, once deemed inferior in a turning fight, now represented an insurmountable and baffling threat. It shattered morale, undermined established tactical doctrine, and fundamentally altered the strategic landscape of the Pacific Air War. The Japanese High Command was adrift in a sea of perplexing unknowns, their elite pilots outmaneuvered by an aircraft they believed they understood. The question that haunted their war rooms, "What has changed?" found its answer not in a classified intelligence brief from Washington, nor in a new radical design from Lockheed's drawing boards. It lay instead within the gritty, often overlooked world of the ground crews, specifically in the hands of one ingenious, unsung individual. His name was Sergeant James Mckenna, a crew chief with the 5th Air Force's 475th Fighter Group, stationed in New Guinea. Mckenna was not an aerodynamicist nor a test pilot. He was a mechanic, intimately familiar with the P-38 Lightning's every rivet and wire. From his vantage point on the flight line, he had long observed a critical yet overlooked deficiency in the P-38's flight control system.
The aircraft, for all its speed and firepower, suffered from a subtle but fatal design flaw: excessive slack in its aileron control cables. This seemingly minor issue meant that when a pilot moved the control stick, there was a fractional, yet strategically catastrophic, delay before the ailerons responded fully. In the lightning-fast, unforgiving environment of aerial combat, particularly against the nimble A6M Zero, this fractional delay was the difference between a successful evasion or a fatal hit.
Mckenna had repeatedly attempted to report this issue through official channels, only to be met with bureaucratic inertia and dismissive responses from engineers who adhered rigidly to specifications. But as casualty lists mounted and the despair among the pilots deepened, Mckenna understood that adherence to protocol was a luxury they could no longer afford. He took matters into his own hands. Working clandestinely, often under the cover of darkness, he devised a deceptively simple yet profoundly effective solution. Using a common, readily available component, a Z-shaped piano wire tensioner, Mckenna installed this device directly into the aileron control cables of a specific P-38. This modification completely eliminated the problematic slack, ensuring an instantaneous, crisp response from the ailerons, transforming the aircraft's roll rate and, consequently, its ability to initiate and recover from turns. This was the secret weapon that had confounded the Imperial Japanese Air Force. Not a new engine, not heavier armament, but a $2 piece of piano wire, strategically placed by a resourceful ground crewman operating entirely outside the chain of command. This was, following Lieutenant Hayes's unparalleled success over Rabaul, the Mckenna fix ceased to be a mere whispered rumor and rapidly transformed into an operational imperative among ground crews. Captain Frank Mitchell, having directly witnessed Hayes's P-38 execute maneuvers previously deemed impossible, immediately sought out Mckenna. He reportedly stated, "Sergeant, whatever you did to Hayes' bird, I want it on mine." This direct endorsement from an experienced combat pilot served as a powerful catalyst. Word of mouth, the most potent form of communication in the close-knit and high-stakes environment of a forward airbase, ensured the modification's swift propagation. Ground crews, often privy to the raw, visceral accounts of pilots returning from harrowing engagements, understood the life-or-death implications of even a fraction of a second's delay in control response. They observed the dramatic improvement in aircraft handling and, driven by a fierce loyalty to their pilots and a shared desire to turn the tide, began implementing Mckenna's ingenious solution. This was, undoubtedly, a significant breach of established protocol. Modifications to combat aircraft, particularly those affecting flight controls, were strictly forbidden without extensive engineering review and official approval from the Army Air Forces and Lockheed. Yet, in the crucible of active combat, where the official channels often moved too slowly for the exigencies of survival, a grassroots revolution was taking place. Field mechanics, utilizing their innate ingenuity and whatever materials were available, retrofitted P-38s with the Z-bar tensioner, working often under cover of darkness to avoid detection by higher command. The result was a tangible, immediate improvement in the P-38's roll rate and responsiveness, directly contributing to a marked increase in the American pilot's kill-to-loss ratio against the vaunted A6M Zero. The sheer statistical anomaly of the P-38's suddenly enhanced performance could not remain concealed indefinitely. As reports from the Pacific Theater highlighted a perplexing shift in aerial combat dynamics, the Army Air Force's command inevitably took notice of the unauthorized, yet undeniably effective field modification. An investigation was launched, uncovering a widespread, non-standardized modification across numerous P-38 squadrons. Initially, there was considerable institutional resistance and skepticism regarding a solution originating from a non-commissioned officer, implemented outside official engineering channels. However, the irrefutable combat data and the unanimous testimony of pilots who attributed their survival to the modification compelled a rigorous evaluation. Lockheed engineers dispatched to the field meticulously examined Mckenna's design. Their analysis confirmed his initial diagnosis. The simple tensioner effectively eliminated the critical slack in the aileron control cables, translating directly into a tighter, more immediate control response. The elegant simplicity and profound effectiveness of the Z-bar were undeniable.
Following exhaustive flight testing and structural analysis, Lockheed formally recognized the efficacy of Mckenna's innovation. Rather than penalizing the unauthorized modifications, the company swiftly integrated a refined version of the tensioning system into the P-38's production line. This engineering update became standard on subsequent P-38J and P-38L models, directly translating a field-expedient fix into a factory-standard feature. The grassroots ingenuity of a single technical sergeant, initially a defiance of regulation, had thus fundamentally redesigned a critical component of one of America's most potent combat aircraft, significantly enhancing its tactical capabilities and altering the aerial balance of power in the Pacific. Mckenna's modification gave the P-38 a decisive tactical edge. For Japanese pilots, the fighter's sudden, inexplicable agility was a tactical enigma that shattered their combat doctrine and psychological superiority. This single, uncredited field fix fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Pacific skies, inverting casualty ratios and saving hundreds of American pilots. The Japanese command's inability to comprehend the change led to widespread disarray, hastening Allied air superiority.
James Mckenna, the sergeant whose ingenuity changed the air war, returned to a quiet civilian life. His unauthorized modification, despite its immense impact, remained largely uncredited. He was a humble man who never sought formal accolades for his work. Mckenna passed away in 2006, but his legacy endures in the pilots he saved and the strategic confusion his simple fix caused the enemy. His story is a clear example of how critical, transformative solutions often come from the practical ingenuity of individuals on the front lines.